We're live.
Great, thank you. I'm just looking for the agenda. Is everybody back?
I think I see everyone who was here previously.
Okay, perfect.
Alderman Cardenas.
Yeah, except for Alderman Cardenas. I'll get in touch with him.
Well, let's make sure that he's on like he was before we take attendance. All right, well, we'll add him when he gets on, I guess. I'd like to call the Environmental Commission to order. Lori, will you please take the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Bridget Degnan.
Present.
Commissioner Dennis Deere.
Present.
Alderman George Cardenas was on, and we'll add him when he joins us again. Douglas Dotz.
Here.
Mark Potosnak.
Here.
Margaret Schneeman.
Here.
Sarah Lovinger.
Here.
Robert Mead, I know, emailed me and he could not join today, and Victoria Wilson.
Present.
All right, Madam Chair, you have a quorum, and actually I see the alderman joining now. So we'll give him a minute and then I'll call him again.
Okay, great. Do we have any public testimony?
You have no public testimony today. And Alderman Cardenas, are you with us now? Well, I'll add him and he is available.
Great. Can we get a motion to approve the committee minutes from the August 16th meeting? It's moved by Commissioner Dennis Deere. Can I get a second?
A second.
Seconded by Victoria. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. In the opinion of the chair is the ayes have it. Now we'll begin the discussion of our policy groups. Why don't we start with composting, a composting update.
Victoria, do you want to go, or do you, or it's up to you?
Well, I don't have anything to update in regards to the committee as of right now. As you know, we're ready to move on to phase 2, which will be implementation, preparing a thought out process about how we will be able to engage everyone with our suggestions per our previous ordinance recommendations.
Thanks, Victoria. Mark, can you sum up the internship partnership with Northwestern that you had communicated to us last month about?
Yeah, sure. So the background is working with collaborators at Northwestern University, University of Illinois, Chicago, Chicago State, and sort of the University of Illinois. It's sort of, I think it's, I don't have the exact title, but it's part of the University of Illinois. So we're all partners, and it's a data science for undergraduates. So the idea is there's a classroom curricular component. I won't go through that, but for us, what's important is we're going to be able to fund quite a number of undergraduate students over the summer to do partnerships. The idea being there's a lot of, it's focused on nonprofit, but Cook County certainly is a governmental organizations eligible. And the focus would be to get students with data science skills embedded in organizations, nonprofit, Cook County, that could use those skills for particularly looking at issues around environment, health, social justice in the city of Chicago. So this sounded interesting, sounded like, considering a lot of the work we do, there's a lot of numbers behind them. Obviously, industrial composting, how much composting is happening, how much garbage is getting hauled around. Those are all numbers. So it'd be nice to have a student to be able to work on and visualize, make, for example, maps across the city. So we talked to Tamika, who's in, I guess, just HR at the county, and just, what does it take? And it actually sounds pretty reasonable. We'll provide information And it looks like there's not any, we'll have some paperwork, but it really didn't seem that bad. So I think we have an opportunity to work with some of these data science students. On our end, me in this project, which is called it's called MCDC. I should have started with that. Of course, it's a Metropolitan Chicago Data Science Core. So this kind of cute name for this core of students that will be working throughout the city. If we're interested, we can do what's called a request for data services. So that's it's pretty straightforward, but you say what data you have and what you'd like done with it. And then you send that in. The one caution here is the projects have to be well scoped. You can't just say, hey, I'd like to know this. I don't know what data I have, and I don't really know once I have the data. I have some vague desire. That's our only caution. Not that that's a bad thing, but undergraduates just won't have they can't scope the project. So once the project's scoped and identified, then I think you can set the undergraduates loose on it. So if we're interested, we could do one of these, they call them RDSs, request for data services.
That's amazing. So I think, there's a lot of areas of acute scope that we could assemble for this. When we had talked about industrial composting, and as we'd realized, I think the hurdles that exist, we had also talked about how to encourage and bring people and businesses, I guess, to Cook County to increase infrastructure for industrial composting. And part of that meant, how do we make Cook County a business-friendly environment? And I think one of the best ways, recognizing that we are in county government, is to see whoever's talking, can you put yourself on mute? Thank you. So we had talked about maybe creating a tax incentive. So we have got lots of different tax incentives in the county for a number of different things, but there's no tax incentives to focus on supporting environmental businesses. So I talked to the assessor's office about whether or not other counties across the country do tax incentives for businesses like industrial composting, or some, I guess, narrow silo of businesses that would support the environment. So if we can write a tax incentive, pass it through the county board to support businesses that would, then come and open businesses for industrial composting, hopefully it would increase the value of the land. It would add tax dollars to our tax base in Cook County, and that business would get a tax incentive for a number of years to even exist, encouraging them to, to even be. And then hopefully once that happened, on the back end, once they had compost, then we could figure out if we could work with IDOT, CDOT, and Cook County Department of Transportation to require them to then acquire a certain amount of compost in their operations. Now, I recognize that composting for this, the compost material might mess with the structural integrity of the actual road, to the extent that they're doing side work on the side of the road that has nothing to do with the structural integrity of the road, and they're just buying topsoil, or other governmental organizations are just buying topsoil. Perhaps we could find a way to work with those governmental organizations to require them to buy compost, then giving those industrial composting businesses the predictability that their end product is actually worth something, it's saleable. And I think with that kind of closed loop dynamic, it could really open the whole commercial space for industrial composting, making it a lot easier for these big businesses to find a way to push their food waste out of a landfill and into these businesses. So I think, asking the MCDS Corp and doing RDS for how much, topsoil do our, even in this region, how much topsoil do they buy that could be supplanted with compost, or a number of those types of things, or even the amount of money that we might expect to get from the tax base for industrial composting businesses, or I just feel like there's a lot. I'm just at this point, there's just a lot there, I think, that we could put together for acute RDSs. And maybe if it went to one student, that student could work on both ends of that life cycle. So I think that's something worth exploring soon, because I imagine those RDSs are going to need to be issued soon. So those kids, the young people, I'm not saying kids, the young people who would be doing these projects would then have some time to say that that's something they would like to do next summer, because as we know, time goes really quickly.
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds terrific. We call them kids too, so it's okay.
Well, I mean, they're not 15, but
No.
okay, good. I'm glad. So I understand that you guys are having a subcommittee as well coming up in November.
Did we get that on? Are we meeting with that other group? Did that get scheduled? The sustainability group?
Sorry, I had just put that on as if we could go ahead and come prepared, ready to schedule something for November, or be ready to email me some dates. But we don't have anything on the books officially.
But Commissioner, oh, go ahead,
I
Victoria.
was going to ask the same question that you were, Mark. Go ahead and ask the question.
Yeah.
We had that discussion about meeting with, I think, a larger sustainability task force. Did that? I think we were working towards a meeting. Did that ever get set up? Are we still working towards that?
Are you talking about Stephanie's group?
Yeah, I think so. Were we gonna meet with them again, or was there any?
We can certainly do that. And I know that there's some other people that had contacted us about energy cycle and waste to energy type of, the feasibility, I guess, of that, that type of, not entity, but the feasibility of a certain waste to energy makeup. So, Lori and I could definitely schedule that, maybe a discussion with both of those groups and this subgroup for November. Lori, will you please put that on our calendar? And then we'll do that. And then there was Patriot Acres was an organization that was setting up a composting facility north of the city, I think maybe in Glenview or something. And we wanted to talk to them about some of the hurdles that they had faced, some of the issues they'd faced. There's a lot of zoning, there's, a lot of local governmental restrictions for whatever municipality you're in. Probably wouldn't be in Chicago, but we wanted to see what kind of hurdles they're facing too. So why don't we try to, Lori, we'll throw out some dates later today to the subcommittee, but then I think you guys also need to meet independently. So who is the head of the composting subcommittee? Victoria. So Victoria, will you please schedule a meeting with this subcommittee to talk about the next steps and put together at least a 3-point plan about what you need to get done next, so then the rest of us can step in and help you where we can. So I definitely want you guys to meet in November. Okay, sounds good. Did Victoria, were you going to say something?
Oh, no, I was just confirming, not a problem.
Perfect. Okay, good. Thanks, Mark. So let's move on to tree planting. Margaret, do you want to take the lead on the update about open lands, the tree planting that we just did, and what we discussed about moving forward with their support?
Sure, and feel free to jump in with details on that event. So we did have our tree planting event at the Bridgeview Courthouse that was highly successful. There was really, really great turnout, and the energy around that event was really great. I want to say we planted 50 trees. That might be, someone from the commissioner's office can confirm that. So it was just a great event. We had a follow-up meeting. And so in terms of the partnership, that was with Open Lands, CRTI, and a bunch of other groups. And so we did have a subcommittee meeting on October 8th to follow up with connecting with Nordsong Green Earth Foundation that was also present there. And they were going out last Friday to look at the Markham Courthouse. They had identified land availability as the number one barrier to actually getting this done. And so we think that the model of planting at courthouses is really strong in that regard in terms of access to land. And so we had a great meeting with them, and we talked about how to best leverage all these different partnerships and how to move forward. And we have a bunch of follow-ups from that meeting, including just connecting across and networking across a lot of groups. So connecting them with MWRD and the Extension Master Gardeners. We did talk also a lot about the handoff period after that 3-year maintenance period and how crucial that is to also increasing the tree canopy. I think that's all I have for that. So moving forward, continuing this partnership with Open Lands, and then just strategically identifying where we want to have these partnerships and do these plantings. Again, looking at that Markham location and how we can partner going forward.
Sounds good. Yeah, that tree planting was really successful. I think that we had asked for 40 volunteers to come out and help plant trees, and we got over 70 volunteers that day. They had, I mean, the sign up list was, you know, binary, so you couldn't add your name after 40, so people just kind of showed up, which I was really surprised about, because generally in our experience trying to get volunteers, it's very difficult. So having people show up, you know, once the list had closed, I think was very inspiring for everybody there. It was a beautiful day. It was sunny. It wasn't too hot. Everybody had a really nice time. I think what I was most heartened by is that in talking to the leadership at Open Lands, it sounds like they have significant funding to acquire the trees, which we thought would be a huge hurdle. And so now, you know, it sounds like they will be able to get those trees. We really need to find the communities that will plant the trees. So I think if the tree planting group can get together on a subcommittee and find out how many trees would be the minimum for a group to take and plant at a time, then we can start increasing the amount of trees. If it's 50 at a time or 30 at a time, then if like big swaths, we can just start increasing to our 1,000 tree goal. So if we have 50 at a courthouse and 50, you know, at a different courthouse, and then 75 at a hospital facility, or 30 and, you know, I don't know, Harvey and Robbins, then we can just keep going up until we feel like we've either reached the goal of 1,000, or we've spent 3 years on this and we feel like that's sufficient and we have, you know, enough work, and we can then continue to reach out as catch can and move on to the next Environmental Commission objective. But I think for all of us, we really need to start reaching out to communities that we know about, or the people who are in touch with communities that have less trees than they would like, to see if there is an area where we could get together with another 50 volunteers and plant within, you know, a small community, and then make sure that that community, like Margaret had mentioned, is mulching and watering regularly for 3 years. And as I understand it, Open Lands doesn't require you to mulch all the time. It's like twice a year, is that right? Right, one in the spring and one in the fall, Margaret?
Yeah, that's correct.
And then I think watering regularly. So I think the easiest thing would be to find municipalities, particularly on the south and west side, who have the ability to water. They might water already, and they would just add these trees to their watering tour across those 3 seasons. So if anybody knows of communities, or mayors in communities, or facility maintenance folks in those communities that need trees and want trees, I think that would be our easiest way to get the trees into the ground, providing we have community support. So I also say that because this is streaming live on Facebook, and if anybody knows of a community that needs trees and has the capability to continue to support those trees once they're planted, that's really what we're looking for.
Yeah, we also talked about along those lines, thank you, Bridget. We also talked about along those lines of doing a flyer that we could put in newsletters to help us with our outreach, to move that forward, to include in all the social media and newsletters that we're already getting out about our other efforts.
Well, I know Tommy on our team isn't on this call, but he is constituent outreach, and he and Kat do a lot of flyers for our office. And Lori, can you add that to your to-do list, and then we'll have Kat and Tommy do that, and we'll bring the flyer back to the group and email it around so people can approve it or make suggested changes.
Yep, definitely.
Sounds good. Are we done with tree planting, Margaret?
I'd
Yes.
like to add, this is Sarah, I'd like to add something.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Bridget. So I'm now on the Nordson Green Earth Foundation team, and it has a public health focus because one of the founders is also a doctor. We've got like 3 doctors on it's an all volunteer group. But what's come to light recently is that there is a sort of a violence interruption benefit of tree planting. And so some of you may have read the opinion article in the New York Times last Sunday from an emergency medicine doctor in Philadelphia, Eugenia Smith, and she's known for this. She researched blighted neighborhoods and found that if people planted trees in the blighted neighborhoods, and this was only in Philadelphia, but she does mention Chicago, that a violent crime, once the trees were planted, violent crime was reduced. Which like makes a lot of sense, but maybe is not an approach that people had thought of before. So, you know, while I wanted to plant trees because of the carbon reduction benefit of trees, I think that this is a great secondary benefit and certainly could be something that we can all work towards. You know, certainly the commission could say, we should plant trees here, help us plant trees here because it's going to improve, you know, this scourge in our city. That's terrible. And now there is evidence-based research behind that.
Agreed. There's a number of studies that have come out in the last 15 years. I know University of Washington did a big study in a number of different cities, but they also did one in Chicago where they took architecturally similar buildings in low income areas that had been plagued by crime. And, you know, they looked at the buildings, the one that had significantly more greenery around it had up to or at least 20% decrease in crime around that. And they were all public housing buildings. And so then that study was replicated in a number of other cities. Baltimore also had, I think, a 12% decrease in crime, just because there were some bushes and small trees around the public housing buildings. And so that study has been replicated a number of times in different areas around the US. And so I think it's a very, Sarah, to your point, it's very well documented that the increase in greenery does correlate to a significant decrease in crime. So I think that's why, especially having greenery in lower income communities is really important for us to focus on. Unfortunately, you know, historically, communities that are lower income, you know, have not had the resources or the municipal support to go out and plant the trees and then to water them, especially if they are small municipalities that are not, you know, obviously the city. They really struggle with funding, so for them to buy the trees and for them to have, you know, a robust public facilities department isn't what happens. So then it really ends up being community support. It's like the people who live and work in that community that end up having to water those trees. And, you know, if you're living in a low income community and you have several jobs, it's not always feasible for you to get out there and water trees every other day. So that's, you know, where the rubber meets the road has been really difficult. So I super appreciate that, Sarah. I think you make that's a great point. Yeah. Hi, Commissioner Deere.
Hi, who was the author of the New York Times article? I missed that. I think that was Sarah.
Hi, her name
Hi.
is, let me, so it came out, so today is the 18th. So it came out on the 10th,
On the
so 1
10th?
week ago.
Okay, that's fair enough. I can look at the New York Times.
So, yeah, I think, let me just, let me Google the
Sarah,
Eugenia.
can you just share it in the email with all of us? And Commissioner Deegan, if you can share your articles as well, we would like to read those as well. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll circulate it.
Yeah,
And then I
thanks for
know,
that, Victoria. I agree.
Yeah,
That's
so her name is Eugenia South. And she's a physician at UPenn. But I will share a link to the New York Times article that she wrote about her research.
perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It mentioned
Thank you.
Chicago, so.
And Commissioner, if you could do the same with the articles you mentioned, that
Yeah.
would be helpful for me. Thanks.
I'll circulate it to the whole commission. And then Lori, could you
Thanks.
give an update about, we have met with Nordson's as well, and they had come out to help plant the trees at the courthouse recently. Can you share the update about partnering with them with volunteer hours for the restorative justice courts with the Chief Judge's Office?
Yeah, I had a discussion with Sheetal from that group. And we discussed just generally some barriers to planting trees. And she is applying for some funding that would in part train arborists in certain communities to come and be like the lead in these community events. I'm sorry, these community groups who want trees planted. And so I connected her with another Margaret from the Chief Judge's Office who runs these restorative justice courts. The restorative justice courts are an alternative for emerging adults. Instead of being part of the traditional court system, they go to these courts where they talk about, you know, whatever crime they committed, the harm that was caused, and how they can essentially make the community whole again. And so part of that is volunteer hours. They also are often, you know, encouraged to do job training, and they follow up a lot with the judge that's in charge of those courts. So I got her in touch with Margaret so that there could potentially be a partnership if she does, you know, do this arborist training. Some of these emerging adults could go through that training, but even if they don't want to take that step, I think there's some opportunity there where they could just do volunteer hours for mulching, watering, all of that. So I connected them, and we can certainly be a part of that conversation as well with this group.
Lori, I'm going to jump in just to say we should close the circle on this, because for the past 4 years, I've been running a green infrastructure training, including trees with CRTI OAI, which is an economic development corporation on the south side. It's done a lot of work with workforce reentrance and CRTI. And so we've been piloting a 1-day training for people who can't afford a more expensive 5-day training. And we've been running that for the last 2 years. Yeah, so we should try to connect the dots on that. Yeah.
Yeah, if you, well, I can send you an email after this, and we can also connect you with the other Margaret.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everyone in the tree planting group. And then the weed/native garden ordinance there was one half of what we had kind of talked about passed at the city council level. So an amended weed ordinance was passed in September by the City of Chicago City Council. It adds into the municipal code that the Department of Streets and Sanitation will establish and maintain a free registry of managed native and pollinator gardens. So anybody that is on occupied property can put their name into the registry. The native gardens cannot occupy or encroach onto the public sidewalk or way or onto other people's property. Or be on your own property line. If it's in a parkway in front of your house, you have to have a permit, and you cannot still have plants that are taller than 10 inches, which I find to still be an issue. And the gardens must be intentionally planted and must be able, the person who's occupying that property must be able to identify the plants. It does not say whether or not a majority of the plants, it just says you have to identify plants in the garden. It also creates a native and pollinator garden registry advisory board to review garden related applications and complaints and then make recommendations on those. The advisory board will be 9 members, including some subject matter experts and community stakeholders. And so, you know, part of our native garden group was to get, you know, the whole purpose and reason to be of our subcommittee was to make sure that the city would allow native gardens to even exist. So this definitely, I think, checks that box, that the city recognizes that native gardens are important and really creates a carve out allowing them to exist. My biggest issue with it is that still plants over 10 inches technically would be in violation of the weed ordinance. So I wonder if, you know, we still want to create a carve out or an amendment to this ordinance to take on that issue where your permit allowing you to have a native garden doesn't allow you to have plants that are over 10 inches. Or because that this registry was passed, that we consider this a win and move on and split up the subcommittee from the native garden ordinance and allocate those people to the composting and tree planting groups. So what do you guys think about that?
Well, congratulations on the win for sure.
Absolutely.
That's awesome, and I'm excited to see that it is at this particular space. We would love to have you at composting.
I'm just curious, what were the voices and what were they saying that kind of put that, you know, kept that limitation?
Well, I think, you know, so Alderman Hopkins had been working on this for a while with his team, and we had a number of meetings with him about, you know, the concern about the 10 inches. Excuse me. And also the fact that to be on the registry, you know, it's a free registry, but then the city at the end of the day still technically has the enforcement authority to come and say, well, this really isn't being maintained in the way that the registry requires. So they maintain all the enforcement authority. I think the 10 inches really was the sticking point with a number of folks at the city. So, you know, I don't know how long it would take to get that 10-inch height restriction removed, or even if it's possible at this time. But obviously everybody in the community wanted that 10, they think 10 inches, and I agree with them, is most grasses are over 10 inches, most flowers are over 10 inches. So it seems like an arbitrary, silly height restriction that nobody really knows where it came from. Just came from like some bureaucrat who decided to pass it years ago.
Well, I have a question. In regards to certain native plant species, don't they have that species and the genre of that species, knowing how high they grow? And if it's some that are actually been adopted inside of this ordinance, can't they make that the limiting factor right there is the native plant species that might exceed that 10 inches? It's kind of odd.
I think if you talk to the community, the gardening community, they recognize almost everything's going to be over 10 inches at its full height that you're going to want to plant in a native garden. And I think the reason, if you go back to the beginning, who picked that 10 inches and why did they pick it? And so I think it was just picked way back when in the 80s, I think when this was first passed, when people really, everybody wanted green grass in the front of your yard was the American ideal. And so grass growing more than 10 inches looked like an eyesore. And now we've come 40 years later and recognize that green grass is not the ideal. You know, having more green is the ideal. And we're encouraging people to move away from just having a green yard where they're using fresh, clean water that's gone through a filtration plant that's used a lot of energy to water their lawns, right? We want people to have native gardens. So the 10 inches is like this. I think it's a red herring. I think it's not. There's no legitimate, logical reason why 10 inches should even be in the weed ordinance.
I mean, I think the 10 inches relates to if you're trying to keep somebody from just letting their lawn go to seed, but that's not what's happening here. And basically any native plant you plant is going to be more than 10 inches, and some of them way more than 10 inches. I mean, we talk about monarch butterflies and you want to plant milkweeds. All except one species of milkweed is over 10 inches, and the ones that you're going to have in your yard are going to violate it. So, I mean, I think eventually fixing that would be a good idea. Part of it will be in the enforcement, whether who is it, Streets and Sanitation, that does the enforcement?
Let me check my notes.
But anyway.
Yep, it is.
Yeah, if they start going after people that have a registered garden because their garden has plants that are up more than 10 inches, then it will definitely need to be fixed. But it may be that this carve out will sort of say to them, okay, these are people who are trying to do what we want them to do, so we'll leave them alone. And I just don't know.
My concern too is that, aldermen at the end of the day have a lot of discretion. And I think there's a number of folks who know that these people have native gardens and they're happy to have those native gardens be there. And then some live in communities that have more issues with abandoned properties, and they're going to want to go and have their folks go in there and mow to keep their areas more tidy looking for areas with more abandoned properties. And that's just kind of the enforcement. Of course, it's not being enforced in some places because there's, it's beautiful and those people are keeping up their properties versus people who aren't. And that, I think there was a rub there too. So I think it's, I'm heartened by this. I'm excited by this. I guess my question to the group is, should we just keep kind of on the sideline advocating for the 10 inches to be removed and then split up the native garden folks and then allocate them to the other teams? Or should we keep trying to keep that group, keep that group constituted and then work towards removing that 10-inch requirement? Keep lobbying city.
It could probably go either way. I mean, it just depends on how strongly the group feels about removing the 10 inches. I mean, it probably means that group doesn't need to, if it's still constituted, it probably means that group doesn't need to meet as frequently, but they're following the legislation. It's my 2 cents.
I mean, I'm more inclined to split up the group and then allocate them to the groups that need more attention and time. I think, as with government and commissions, you hope to get things exactly where you want them to get, but we're not robots and it doesn't need to be perfect.
Yeah.
So I think to remain a little bit more nimble, I think it would probably be a good idea to split up that group and reallocate them. Should we take a vote on this, people? It sounds like everybody's for splitting up the group is what I'm seeing it with the hands. Thumbs up. Cool. Okay. So we, I guess we'll split up that group and figure out where people land, and then we'll update the group about who the planting and composting groups about which people they'll be getting. So let's move on to open discussion. Does anybody have some updates to the group about the work that they're doing or any environmental issues that they would like to speak about?
So this is not in Cook County, but I want to make sure people are aware of the issue around Bell Bowl Prairie, which is on the land of Rockford Airport and is a high quality gravel hill prairie, which is one of the rarest prairies there is. And basically it's under immediate threat of being turned into more air cargo space. And so a lot of people are working on it. It's one of the kind of, it gets back to the legislation issue, which is if it's on private land, it doesn't have the same sorts of protection it has if it's on public lands. And the airport is a funny mix. You know, it's sort of a private public partnership kind of thing. And it is not a nature preserve, which it would qualify for, but because it never got put through on that, the airport's in the process of basically destroying it. We'll see what happens. A lot of people are fighting against it right now. So if you're interested, you can look for, I think it's called Save Bell Bowl Prairie online and see what is going on.
Did you say Bell, like Bell, and bowl,
Yeah,
like
and
BOWL?
bowl, like bowl of cereal, yeah.
And where is it located?
It's in Rockford on the airport grounds.
Has the has Rockford, like city council or anybody weighed in on that issue?
So it's basically under the control of the airport. So it's like, so it's an authority that, you know, it's kind of like the equivalent of the Port Authority. They have the rights to that land, and it's really hard for the city to do anything about what the Port Authority is going to do on the land they control. Same way with the airport. I think it's probably the same way with O'Hare. And to this point, the city has been quiet about it. The state is essentially IDNR sort of signed off on them going ahead and destroying it with the idea they would move the plants that were there, which won't work. You know, it's part of the reason it's a very specialized one is it has really specialized soils and hydrology, and you just can't take that and put those plants in a different spot and have them survive. So there are still things being done. You know, writing legislators is a high priority thing. This is something where the state could potentially step in, but you'd need the legislators to be behind that.
When is this Bell Bowl Prairie set to be decimated?
They are set to continue working on it beginning November 1st. The reason for that date is rusty patched bumblebee, which is a federally threatened species, has been found there. Unfortunately, it was found there after the environmental assessment was done. There are a lot of pieces to this we don't really need to get into, but that was found after that. So, and although its habitat is in theory protected, what you have to do is have a place declared critical habitat to protect that habitat, which wasn't done for this site because no one knew it was there when they were declaring critical habitat for rusty patched bumblebee. But they can't harm the bees themselves. So if they wait until November when they go underground, then when they'll be sure to be underground, in theory, they can move forward, even though in practice they are destroying those bumblebees. So.
But I mean, they can do an updated survey for all of those things. They can do an amended if they
Yeah,
find something, right?
they can, but the airport doesn't want to, of course, and right now, nobody's found the leverage to bring it to a halt yet.
Well, as a commission, I know that we can write like letters and resolutions signed by our members. So we could do a little bit more research and figure out if that's something that we would want to do. November 1st is,
It's
you know,
pretty
12
soon.
days a day, 12 days away. And you know, a letter writing campaign basically would be a letter to the operators of the airport, and then our commission would have to sign that letter all individually, and then we would have to send that letter with signatures on it to the state legislators, particularly in and around Rockford, saying our commission, and anybody else who might want to, you know, back up sign it. I don't know if there's anybody else who would want to do that. I wish we had more time, but that doesn't mean we can't do something. So let me think on that, Doug, and see if there's some letter that we could write, and then in concert with you.
Okay.
And then people could sign it if they wanted to.
Yeah.
They're doing
And
their
this
own
is
research.
something, I mean, we're Field Museum, we've had to do stuff for lobbying and able to write letters on this that we hadn't set ourselves up to do before. So
So you already have the letters.
we have a version, I mean, a Field Museum version. There's also, you know, the people fighting it have sort of a draft letter
Petition.
you can work off of. So
Okay. Well, can you send us those copies?
yeah.
Perfect. Anyone else have an update they want to share?
Well, hello, everybody. Not much of an update, but I just wanted to reemphasize how excited I am about the new bill with CEJA being passed in the state of Illinois and what that means for environmental justice issues around the state of Illinois, as well as in the county area. I've been in communication with a lot of the BPOC nonprofit organizations, and we are super excited about the social equity topics that have been identified inside of this new law, as well as focusing on workforce development and just social justice in general, as that continues to develop. And my partnership with everybody on the state level and the county level, as well as in those organizations, I will be bringing those issues to the table. So I'm very excited. I hope you guys are excited to push for a more clean, carbon-free Illinois. Yay!
Yay!
Yay. Thanks for all your work too, Victoria. Doing an excellent job.
Thank you. I'm excited. It's good work to be done.
Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's really excited about that. And I know that there's been a lot of discussion about ARPA funding and electric vehicles and a lot of infrastructure to support clean energy with that too.
Yeah, and I'm super excited to see how the composting will definitely tie into that, as well as everything that we're doing here at the commission. So it's really going to be a very exciting time for everything that's going to be transpiring over the next 5 years. So buckle up your seatbelts.
Amen. Okay, anyone else? Okay, so this meeting marks about 2 years since this commission had our first meeting, and pursuant to our ordinance, each of our terms is 2 years in length. So we have received a number of applications over the last few months, particularly in certain areas of people, you know, I think in connection with the work that we're doing, I guess a lot more people watch us on Facebook Live and see our posted YouTube videos. And I know that our office has got a lot of feedback from people in different areas of Cook County. So people are watching us. They are following the work that we're doing. I think there's a lot of gratitude for the fact that we are doing work that's not just policy related work, but work to actually put the trees in the ground and make actionable change. And so I'm really proud of the work that we've done, even given the fact that we had to work our way through COVID and technology issues. And honestly, this is the first time I've ever led a commission like this. And so I had, you know, to kind of fumble my way through creating the subgroups and figuring out how to get leads for those subgroups. And really organizationally, I'm just really proud of each one of you guys in the way that we've really pulled together as a team, given our different backgrounds, knowledge, and experience. So I'm really grateful, and I'm full of gratitude for all the work that you guys have done, and how seriously you've taken this, and the level of commitment you've given to this commission and the work, especially given the fact that this is a volunteer position. So we are going to be saying goodbye to Doug Stotts and Sarah Lovinger. This will be their last meeting, but we're hoping that given their significant experience in this area, that they'll still stay engaged with us, that each one of them, works a lot in, their own area, and the work they will do will continue. So thank you guys very much for all the work that you've done. We have everybody put everybody in committee for the appointments, and that will be up at next month's board meeting in November, where there will be 2 new people who will be voted on and appointed, and then the other people, the existing people, will be reappointed. So we're excited to continue the work, and hopefully, over the next 2 years, the existing objectives that we've started will be finalized and resolved, and hopefully we'll get that done. So I'm excited about that. One thing I should mention is that, we need to think about a different time that we're going to meet. I know 9 a.m. is not the most convenient for everybody. So do you guys have some times that you're better suited to meet, or times that you can be that are more predictable for your schedules?
I think it was just Mondays at 9 a.m.
Yeah, I get it. It's a tough time. I mean,
Mondays.
my schedule is flexible as long as it's on there. I can meet.
Is there any way we can take a poll offline and
Yeah.
see what days works for everybody? And that way we can at least have some running consistency and see what everybody's flexibility is.
Yeah. So Lori, will you circulate an email, please, and put out some dates and times so that we're not just flying blindly, and then we can, if those dates and times, or not dates, the days of the week and the times during that week, if those work, then we'll select it. If not, then we'll kind of go back to the drawing board.
Yes, I will do that today. Thanks.
Okay. And so once that is, we have some days of the week, and sometimes Lori will assemble a calendar that we will approve, and then send out so that we have our next meeting dates, and then you guys can put that on your calendar for 2022. So with that, I think that we're done with our agenda, and we can take a motion to adjourn. Would someone like to make that motion? Doug, why don't you make the motion to adjourn?
I will move that we adjourn.
Sarah, will you second?
Sarah hopped off.
Oh, okay. Mark, will you second?
Second the motion to adjourn.
Great, we are adjourned. Or wait, all in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nays. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. We are adjourned, and we will circulate all the information and see you guys next time. Have a great week.
Thanks, Doug.
Thanks.
We'll see you
Yeah,
soon.
thanks, Doug. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Have a good week.
You too.
Bye.